This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. Luo Yan, 20 wagers of chips, you can just take it. With Shui Luo Yan's status, it was impossible for her to use so many origin stones. However, in this double duel, all the finances were under her control. She must have used the wealth of the Chamber of Commerce privately. Such a casual decision without discussing it with him made him extremely unhappy. He wanted to reprimand him, but he was interrupted just as he opened his mouth. Enough. I have my own way of doing things, you don't need to care. Shui Luoyan was annoyed. Ding Ling could casually use up to 100 billion vitality stones, but she was condemned for using a mere 20 billion. Her heart was burning with anger as she coldly said, Elder Quan, just mind your own business. Luo Yan knows what she's doing, so there's no need for you to worry. You coward. The powerful citizen was suddenly rebutted and flew into a rage, but he couldn't flare up at this moment no matter what. The conversation between the two of them was carried out through voice transmission, and they had to take into account the face of the Mando Chamber of Commerce as a whole. Furthermore, Shui Luoyan's current status was no longer the same as before. Even he had no right to punish her. Good, very good. The powerful man spat coldly. His face turned gloomy and he did not say anything else. Shui Luoyan gave him a cold and disdainful smile. A large merchant association had to rely on a woman like her to pull in external help in order to continue its glory. She did not want to stay in such a place any longer. Moreover, even if this marriage failed, with Xiao Jingming's current infatuation with her, she could at least control Xiao Jingming in her hands, and Xiao Jingming's identity might not be lower than Shen Feng's. After this duel, no matter what the result was, she was no longer a disciple of the Mando Chamber of Commerce. Even the president would have to change his attitude when he saw her, so she was no longer afraid of the people. Min Qingxiang of Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce said with a smile, Is this Li Yunxiao so powerful? Why are you all so curious? Fine, I'll bet a few too, but his ranking isn't that high right now. Everyone looked into the tower and saw that the first person had already reached the 5th floor. To their surprise, it was the disciple of the Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce, while Yunxiao was only on the 3rd floor. This is interesting. I wonder who built this art pagoda. The 3rd level's test should be refining. Yunxiao appeared on the 3rd floor of the technique tower. The condition to pass the test was to extract 7 different raw materials from a large number of loose stones floating in the air, then condense them together according to the ratio to form a 7-star path that led to the 4th floor. There were more than 1,000 types of rocks in the air. The first step was to identify the 7 types of rocks that he needed. Yunxiao's divine sense spread out directly, and the several-mile-long belt of rocks was all under his control. Then, he raised his right hand slightly and pointed at the air. With just one finger, a large number of rocks exploded one by one, shooting out like firecrackers. It seemed to be a mess, but in reality, it was all under his precise control. All 7 materials exploded, and the required proportion was also strictly controlled. Then, Yunxiao performed an incantation gesture with both hands. The shattered powder quickly condensed and gradually spread out in the air, forming a colorful road that led to the sky. Stepping lightly on the 7-star path, Yunxiao headed toward the 4th floor. The scene around him changed again, and he returned to the spell tower. He quickly scanned the tower and saw that 5 people had already reached the 5th level. It seemed that it would be a little difficult from there on. The 4th level was actually a vast white ocean, with no end in sight. On the shore of the sea, there was a huge stone tablet with a few words written on it, controlling the 6 senses, crossing the other shore. This ocean is boundless. How can I cross the other shore? My primordial power seems to have been sealed, Yunxiao muttered to himself. I can control my 6 senses. Is it possible that I can fly with my soul power? But isn't this ocean a little too big? Since it's a test of a 4th-tier art, it shouldn't be too difficult, he said after some thought. He didn't have time to think and immediately spread out his soul power, forming thin silk-like wings on both sides of his body. Like a golden-winged ROC, he flew into the sky and rushed into the vast ocean. The originally calm sea suddenly underwent a huge change. In the blink of an eye, it became turbulent. The sky also darkened, and a pressure of heaven and earth formed on the surface of the sea, sweeping over. This level is indeed a little difficult for Tier 4. Yunxiao carefully sensed the changes in his surroundings. This level was naturally not a problem for him, but his soul power had also made a subtle improvement. If the demonic dragon had not sent him a voice transmission, he would not have noticed it. It's really unbelievable. It can actually enhance soul power when completing these rounds. Oh. It shouldn't be like this, these are all low difficulty levels, they should be easily cleared in minutes. Well, I don't quite understand either. However, your soul power has indeed become purer after you passed the levels. Perhaps these levels contain some kind of supreme heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao of truth? Don't even mention it. Unless there are 10th tier rules of arcana, it's impossible for it to have such a great amplification effect on me. However, this tower only has 9 floors in total. Even if it reaches the peak, it'll at most be at the peak of the 9th tier. But have you thought about it? If you can refine a tower that contains the peak of the 9th level, it wouldn't be strange for it to contain a little power of the 10th level. Yunxiao's body trembled, and his eyes were filled with horror. The dragon's words were like enlightenment, giving him a sudden feeling of enlightenment, but it was hard to accept. Could it be that Ingluo is saying that this spell tower Kasaya was really refined by a level 10 sorcerer god? Even if he's not, he's probably not far from it, the demonic dragon laughed. This art tower itself is a 9th grade item, and the highest level should contain the highest law that the person who refined it has mastered. You'll know when you rush to the top to take a look. Although I was a 9th tier alchemist in my previous life, I was far from the peak of the 9th tier, Yunxiao said thoughtfully. I can also refine this kind of art tower, but I'm afraid I'll have to reach the top to get a glimpse of the supreme law comprehended by the refiner. It's a pity that I don't have the opportunity. I'm only at the 7th step right now, so it'll be pretty good if I can make it to the 8th floor. I'll merge with you at the final moment, the demon dragon said. It shouldn't be a problem for us to break through to the 8th level. However, this might be an opportunity for you to truly step into the 8th step. It's only a matter of time before my strength returns, Yunxiao said. I'm not in such a hurry now, and I'm not as eager as before. Let's just let nature take its course. The ocean kept roaring as he flew, and all kinds of strange phenomena appeared on the surface of the sea, but they had no effect on Yunxiao. However, his brows were furrowed into a deep frown, and it took him a long time to unfurrow them. After the demonic dragon's advice, he began to seriously consider the structure of this spell tower. He secretly thought about how he would refine it and how to achieve such effects if he were in the dragon's shoes. It was like an alchemist getting a model and starting to study and conceptualize the structure and laws within it. Without realizing it, he had crossed the 4th level. With the demon dragon's reminder, he observed his own soul power and realized that it had indeed increased by a lot when he returned to the art tower. Someone's about to enter the 6th level. Cui Bo shouted from outside the spell tower. The betting time is the last 10 seconds. Everyone became nervous. It seemed that Xiao Jingming and the bronze-skinned man from the Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce had the upper hand in the technique tower. They opened their eyes at the same time, which meant that they had obviously passed the 5th level and were about to advance to the 6th level. The two of them looked at each other, their eyes filled with cold hostility. Xiao Jingming also cast his gaze down and glanced at the crowd of over 100 people. When he saw Yunxiao, who was jumping into the 5th floor, a cold sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. On the water curtain outside the technique tower, the 3 people with the most chips were Xiao Jingming, the man from the Thunder Wind Chamber of Commerce, and Li Yunxiao. In the last 10 breaths, seeing that Xiao Jingming and the man from the Thunder Wind Chamber of Commerce had a steady advantage, the chips under them had almost doubled in just 10 breaths. One of them had more than 900 chips, the other had more than 700 chips, and Yunxiao, who was in 3rd place, had more than 400 chips. Su Donha sneered. It seems like the Chamber of Commerce is going to lose everything. They've lost all their family property. There's no need for the martial arts competition tomorrow. Young Emperor Hulian furrowed his brows and asked in confusion. Someone had already been injured before the skill battle and lost before the martial battle even began. However, he doesn't care that he's about to be eliminated. Instead, he likes to point at others. Mo Xiaochuan sighed, what can I do? There's nothing much to see at home, so I'm very happy to see others suffer losses and setbacks. What kind of mentality is this? Young Emperor, you know women the best. Please explain. Sweat. Young Emperor Haolian's forehead was covered in sweat, and he had goosebumps all over his body. That's also a woman. Can you not ruin the word a woman? There are tens of thousands of men here. Do you want them to be completely impotent when they hear the word a woman in the future? Young Emperor Haolian didn't hide his words at all, and all the men's eyes turned to Su Danhe. Then, they shivered and broke out in cold sweat. They agreed with young Emperor Haolian's words, and many of them even covered their mouths and laughed in whispers. As the great elder of the Empyrean One Pavilion, Su Danhe was usually a superior existence. She had never been insulted like this before. Not to mention, there was also the constant ridicule and laughter in private. How could it escape her ears? She was so angry that her brain was in a daze, and she had lost the ability to think. Damn it! Su Danhe instantly exploded. The power of her palm that could tear the sky and earth apart covered her. She had completely gone mad. These people of Tianyuan Trading Company seemed to be her natural-born death. Every time she was angered, her lungs would explode. She wanted to end these people completely regardless of the consequences. Mo Xiaochuan and Halian Xiaohuang had been prepared for this. They had been on guard against the old woman's madness, and they moved the moment she attacked. Su Danhe's strength was unfathomable, and they could not stop her alone. She stood on the left and right sides of Tianyuan Trading Company. If they took a step back, the entire Tianyuan Trading Company would be annihilated. You're the one who should die, old hag. Break. Mo Xiaochuan shouted coldly. The Tiangang demon-slaying sword suddenly flicked out from his right hand, and a sea of sword chi spread out. His fingers flickered as he tapped on the sword one by one. It was as if a seal had been broken. The artifact spirit let out a long cry, and the sword chi shot up into the 9 heavens. Red furnace lights the snow to illuminate the mountains and rivers. He thrust his sword out with all the power of a 4-star martial emperor. This unreserved attack was even more powerful than when he had killed the elder of the Empyrean One Pavilion. On the other side, young Emperor Lilian's fist intent also reached the sky. Although he only had a cultivation of 1 star, all his life's learning was on this fist. With this fist, he proved the way and condensed a rule of heaven and earth. Its power also caused a vision of heaven and earth and a great change of heaven and earth. Under the sudden appearance of these 3 extreme forces, the entire Songwei city turned dark in an instant. The sun and moon lost their light as 3 forces soared into the sky. Just as the 3 of them made their moves, the rest of the people from the Chamber of Commerce changed their expressions. Cui Bo was even more shocked and angry, and he hurriedly attacked. If the 3 of them were allowed to do as they pleased, the entire technique would be completely destroyed. His figure rushed directly toward the art tower. Like a shadow, he circled the tower. Circles of power were released from his body, forming a pink mist that surrounded the art tower. The rest of the people from the 7 chambers of commerce also made their moves. Luo Ying threw out his heaven-suppressing pagoda, and under his incantation seals, it turned into an existence that was not inferior to the art pagoda. In an instant, it locked the space where the 3 of them were fighting in to prevent the shockwaves from being too great. Zhang Chong, Min Xingxiang, and Quan Min worked together to set up a wizardry barrier, which protected the spell tower on top of Cui Bo's. High up in the sky and below the heaven-suppressing pagoda, the 3 forces were squeezed together. The spiritual pressure that was emitted directly broke the spatial lock of the heaven-suppressing pagoda. It spread out like a spider web, and many of them fell to the ground, shaking some of the martial artists into ashes on the spot. The might of a martial emperor was so terrifying. The tens of thousands of people below immediately became chaotic and caused a huge commotion. After casting a spell to protect the spell tower, Shui Bo looked up at the sky. His face darkened and he shouted angrily, "The three of you still haven't stopped. Do you want everyone to join forces to kill you?" It was a grave crime to destroy the double duel, and the people of the Merchant Union should punish him together. This was the rule of the duel agreement, and no one could disobey it. All 9 Heaven's Realm experts, Shui Bo shouted. Maintain order and strengthen the heaven-suppressing tower's barrier. As soon as he finished speaking, he flew up into the air and quickly formed a seal with his hands, striking out a sealing force to suppress the spiritual pressure that broke out of the heaven-suppressing pagoda in the air, so as not to affect the innocent. As soon as he gave the order, dozens of figures rose into the air and protected the heaven-suppressing tower's barrier. Only then did they manage to suppress the 3 men's attack. Luoying immediately felt the pressure on his body decrease and sent out several spells into the pagoda. For a moment, golden light bloomed and the pagoda slowly descended from the sky, trying to completely suppress the 3 of them. Su Donhe, Mo Xiaochuan, and the other 2 weren't in a good state either. The 2 of them had joined forces to fight her to a draw. This was something that Su Donhe had never expected, causing the 3 forces to be in a stalemate. Now that they were being suppressed by everyone, they couldn't release their power. The 3 of them felt an extreme external pressure as if they were about to be crushed into pieces. Her impulsiveness disappeared in the face of death. Su Donhe said angrily, "Why aren't you withdrawing your moves? Do you all want to die?" "Humph, you're the one who provoked me, you old hag. If I'm going to die, you'll die first." Xiao Huanghalian was the weakest among the 3 of them. At this moment, the world of Fist Intent was showing signs of collapse, but he was still talking and laughing, seemingly unafraid. Su Donhe was shocked and furious. She did not want to die with these 2 lunatics. If the heaven-suppressing pagoda gathered everyone's strength and fell, they would be completely finished. When he thought of this, he broke out in a cold sweat and hurriedly said, "I'll count to 3 and everyone will stop. 1, 2, 3. Su Donhe counted to 3 and suddenly withdrew her forces. Mo Xiaochuan and Halian Xiaohuang withdrew at the same time. For a brief moment, they had thought of taking advantage of the situation to completely eliminate Yunxiao's mortal threat, but if they did so, they would certainly be crushed by the heaven-suppressing tower, and when Yunxiao went crazy, he would have to face the entire Merchant Union. In that split second, the 3 forces lost their source and the heaven-suppressing pagoda crashed down. 3 rays of light broke through the barrier and flew out. A loud rumble came from the tower's barrier. The 3 forces were immediately suppressed by the tower and rapidly shrank, finally turning into a small ball of light and being sucked in. Luoying's expression did not change, he calmly performed a few hand seals and kept the heaven-suppressing pagoda back into his hand. Only then did the sky gradually regain its clarity, and the tens of thousands of people below heaved a sigh of relief, gradually calming down the commotion. The dozen or so martial emperor powerhouses in the sky also flew down one after another. All of them did not look too good. The enchantment barrier that Zhang Chong and the others set up outside the technique pagoda was also removed. They all looked at Su Donhe and the other 2 coldly. Cui Bo was the person in charge of the entire Merchant Union and also the highest person in charge of the double duel. He said coldly, "The 3 of you, I need an explanation. Everyone needs an explanation." At this moment, Xiao Huanghalian's face was already pale as he sat on the ground to regulate his internal vital qi. Under the pressure just now, his physical body had almost collapsed, and his martial intent had disappeared. His injuries were extremely serious. Even Mo Xiaochuan was greatly weakened. He said coldly, "Explain? I also want an explanation. It was this old woman who provoked us first and attacked us first. I also hope that you can give us an explanation." Cui Bo frowned as soon as he heard this. He recalled what happened just now and realized that it was indeed the case. However, with Su Donhe's status, it would be strange if she didn't fly into a rage after being teased by the 2. However, Su Donhe was the one who provoked the other party first. In this case, she really couldn't blame Tianyuan Trading Company. Elder Su, what's your explanation? He asked. Su Donha had just experienced a near-death experience and became much calmer. However, her heart was still extremely furious. She snorted heavily and said, "What explanation do I need? Shouldn't I kill them for insulting me with such filthy words?" Mo Xiaochuan laughed coldly. Landlord Cui, you've seen it for yourself. This old woman is very arrogant. After all, tens of thousands of people are watching. Tianyuan Trading Company doesn't care if you continue to be biased since it's not the first time. However, I'm afraid it won't be good for the reputation of Myriad Treasures store, right? Ding Ling also stood out and said coldly, Tower Lord Cui, I'm just a woman, and I'm not as smart as you in terms of words. I'm not as good as you in terms of cultivation, but what I know is the iron law set by hundreds of chambers of commerce in the Merchant Union. Today, Tower Master Cui was hosting the 2 duels, which was the result of the expectations of the public and the absolute trust of hundreds of chambers of commerce in Myriad Treasures store. Tianyuan Trading Company's injured people and the innocent people who were killed by violence just now, please give us an explanation, Tower Lord Cui. Right. You have to give me an explanation. Cries of grief and indignation rang out from the crowd. They were all the relatives and friends of the people who had been killed by the spiritual pressure of the 3 forces. Don't worry, Cui Bo said in a deep voice. No one can disobey the iron law of the Merchant Union. Elder Su Donha, if you can't give everyone a satisfactory explanation, I will have to enforce the law for the Merchant Union and give you an explanation. He said coldly. Su Donha said angrily, what explanation? I didn't do anything wrong. Chui Bo, don't abuse your authority for your own benefit and take revenge for your son. You're courting death. Everyone. Cui Bo was furious. In the name of the ironclad law of the Merchant Union, I order you to attack with me. Let's take down this arrogant and reckless woman. Chui Bo, how dare you call me an idiot? Su Donha gritted her teeth in anger. Everyone was speechless. She was still so arrogant at this time. If she wasn't a stupid woman, what was she? Of course, I will follow the iron law of the Merchant Union. Luo Ying and the others all accepted the order solemnly. In the case that someone openly violated the iron law, the person in charge of the double judges had the right to gather all forces to fight together. Several powerful forces surged out at the same time and locked onto Su Donha. No matter how high her cultivation base was, as long as she resisted, everyone would be able to instantly turn her into ashes. You, Yingluo, don't mess around. Su Donha panicked a little, but she pretended to be calm and shouted, I'm the great elder of the Empyrean One Pavilion. Chui Bo said coldly, as the Grand Elder of the Empyrean One Pavilion, you should know that the rules of the Merchant Union cannot be violated. Now, are you going to give us an explanation or do you want us to give you an explanation? Those extremely strong auras were extremely cold. Su Donha did not doubt that these people would take the opportunity to kill her mercilessly. She immediately felt guilty. How do you want me to explain? Everyone cursed in their hearts. Stupid woman. Other than his high cultivation level, he had no other merits. His intelligence was also low. The Empyrean One Pavilion must have been blind to let this person lead the team. Chui Bo frowned and looked at Ding Ling. Tianyuan Trading Company doesn't want to argue with such a person, Ding Ling said lightly. Fortunately, no one died, but someone was injured. We can just compensate 10 billion yuan stones. As for the relatives and friends of the deceased, I don't have the right to ask for anything from them, but if I were to ask for it personally, I'm afraid I wouldn't dare to ask this old woman for anything. It's better to compensate 10 billion for each of the deceased. 10 billion per person? Just kill me. Su Donha's eyes were about to pop out. At this moment, she was not afraid of death at all. However, when those auras burst out with killing intent again, she immediately shut up and snorted, 10 billion is too much. At most, each person can only pay 100 million primeval stones.